people should want to access your dashboard. People should want to access your tool. Sticky is a first sign of a superb success, but I think is on the rarer side of deployments. My general philosophy when it comes to my roles has usually been create insight or understanding where there's previously none. I think if there is anything that strings through my entire career, it's the idea of, you really want to arm your executives or your stakeholders, whoever it is, with the information that they need to make better, for me, more data-driven decisions. I want to use the information at hand. It's not always leveraged, and try to give people a more confident podium to stand on and say, hey, like, I know that this is a good choice because of XYZ, this new data set, this new insight. So I think that's been my main focus in many ways. Suits my personality just fine. I'm the sort of person who's happy to go and tinker and dive in deep and look at every single grain of sand to figure out what's going on. But that's always important to zoom back out and say, okay, now that I do understand everything that's going on, what's the best thing that I can give you? Don't strive for perfection on the first try, just strive for something. Again, any insight is better than nothing, and as long as you're handing that over and using it, then I think you're headed in the right direction.
Awesome. You used a phrase that I want to come back to, which is the underused or the unknown insight or data. Would love to open up and understand what you mean by that.
So I think in today's business world, with all the digital tools that we're using, all the ways that we're tracked, there's a massive, call it a data wake, that every single person creates on a day-to-day basis, both in and outside of the office. And it's really hard to keep track of all of the data points that we could be using. We don't even know about all of them. There are metadata points inside of our main business systems that never get used. And actually, this is a big project for SecureLink recently, was using the metadata inside of Salesforce to create insight on an action that Salesforce currently isn't exposing. So yeah, dive deeper, figure out a way to make it work even when it's not always surface level. Find it, go find it, or create it if you can't find it.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned there being a data wake here, and often there feels as if there's a data ocean that we're throwing at people. How do we keep this condensed? You said earlier, focus on the important bits. What's your guidelines for doing that?
Keeping it on the important pieces. I think I would go to utility in that case. Everything that you surface to someone should have a call to action, almost. Should either be an insight, a clear insight that they didn't already understand, or it should be a call to action saying, here is something that you weren't aware of, there's the insight, and this is the action that you need to take to either resolve it or undo it or what have you. If you don't have a clear call to action or a very clear, you previously were in the dark and now you're no longer in the dark, then you might need to refine that idea a little bit. It's always about utility. Can I use this? And when I'm using this, what should I do? What is my action?
It's a great segue into process adoption, because that's something that's all about utility. It's something that people use. So talk to me then about just the groundwork required for a successful adoption of a new process.
Yeah. Oh, how many processes I've rolled out. So many. Honestly, Tom, I start almost every single project with empathy. Unless you can sit down with your stakeholder, be it a marketing manager or a CMO, unless you're inside of their shoes, watching what they do, experiencing the problems or the frustrations that they have, it's really hard to deliver something that's truly sticky and of value. So I always like to ensure that I can feel in my heart and in my role and in the things that I'm looking at on my screen, make sure that you're aware of the feelings of the person you're about to deliver a new product process to. Um, that's how to start. Always start with empathy. Say, I feel your problem. I understand it. I'm listening to you. I think that's something that typically gets swept under the rug from the start. Listen to the problems that they have. Listen to the feedback from your idea. And if, well, maybe we can't do this today, but check body language. Make sure that they're receiving your thought in a good, positive light. And then the next thing is to fully bake the idea. I love iterations and I love getting scrappy. You know, one of my career mentors gave me the analogy of painting the Mona Lisa, and it's always best to start with a smiley face. And that's great, but when it comes to process rollout and systems rollout, make sure the idea is fully baked and make sure that you understand the dependent systems and the downstream systems. Make sure you know all the departments or all the people, all the stakeholders that you're going to affect in that vertical stack. Think critically about what you're going to do before you do it. I think that pays dividends in the long run. It always has, personally for me. Then the last part would be iterate. Yeah. Okay. Start with a smiley face. Is this better than what you had yesterday? If yes, great. Let's keep going. Let's add some hair. Is that better than what you had the day before? Perfect. Let's add some features. Let's add some color. But today, I think people are very receptive to iterative solutions, very receptive to here's a first step. This is my initial idea. We're tolerant of the creative process when it comes to rollouts or new systems, new tools, new dashboards. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of the ability to get it wrong the first time. It's an important thing, in my opinion.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Grant, because one of my questions is if there's a journey to be had with process rollout, we'd expect there to be some mistakes and pivoting along the way. And really the question is, how do we keep people engaged with the journey and trusting and believing in that iterative process? It sounds like you think this is naturally something people have patience for these days, but there must at the same time be some work to keep people engaged as well.
Yeah, you're right. There definitely is. It's a balance, right? Everything has to live in balance. You want to iterate, but you don't want to spend 6 months on your first attempt to have it not work. That's a long runway for a first iteration.
Yeah.
So always clear communication. I mean, obviously I don't need to state the obvious. Communicating with your stakeholder, communicating the expectations is super important. And I think sometimes we sugarcoat the reality, especially when it comes to a tech rollout. We tend to wear rose-colored glasses, and a good dose of honesty and humility. Be humble in the work that you're putting out, be honest in the work that you're putting out. People feel that. People feel honesty. You can hear honesty. You can read honesty. So it's always important to stay in touch and stay realistic about what you can do for your stakeholders. And here's another thing, especially when it comes to tech tools, larger tech tools like systems development. If you know where you want to get to down the road, down the line, but you've got a software engineering team that needs 6 months to get there, go and stand next to that person's desk and say, hey, I know that this is a long runway. I know that you're in a painful position right now. What can I, as a scrappy analyst, get you today that adds value to your job while we're waiting for the full feature in the long run? At WeWork, I was part of a systems team that was developing a new real estate pipeline and portfolio management tool. And there were big features. This is a homegrown, fully bespoke tool, and what the engineering team was capable of was incredible. The finished result was amazing, but there was a lot to get done in between Excel and this new system. So oftentimes the operations teams that I was on we would come in and say, okay, we know where we're going, we know where we're headed. What can I get you? What can I get in your hands that serves you utility and can be an intermediary while we wait for the final product? Now, while I'm doing that in my analyst operations roles, I'm also teeing up the data model, the workflow, to match the needs and the sort of the model, the architecture of the final product, so that when we do make that transition, it's not so rough. They're already familiar with it. They know the nomenclature. They know the design, the words, the colors, the scheme, the outputs and the inputs that they need. So it sort of bridges the gap between incredibly loose and incredibly strict. What is the mid ground to get us there? It was a great team. That was a great team.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so that's the one of the compromise, and that's how you find the middle path to being basically most effective, right? I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is about the stakeholder management. At the end of this process, how do you know that it was successful? How do you know you got that buy-in, and how do you know they really loved what you've done? What do you look for there?
Well, and is really the question. It comes in a multitude of different ways. My first manager always used the term sticky. Is it sticky? So sticky is natural adoption, organic adoption. And it's a desire for stakeholders that weren't on your original map to get behind your new project or your new process. People should see your rollout. Now, what comes to mind with this for me was the wiki space, the knowledge base that we set up at WeWork, starting with one department, and then more people saw screenshots of this, presentations during meeting while you're screen sharing, and we would get new requests every day. Can I get on the space? Can I get on the space? Can I get on the space? That's sticky. That's organic adoption. That's organizations, departments putting their effort into something without being required to. People should want to access your dashboard. People should want to access your tool. Sticky is a first sign of a superb success, but I think is on the rarer side of deployments. It's not often that something gets that sort of organic adoption. The thing I look for, if it's not being, spread through the organization, is actually data quality. Most of the deployments that I've done are in some way, shape, or form data or tech related. And while we can create massive systems, huge features, big dashboards, if the data quality, especially if it's something that you're bringing in from your users, so if I'm talking to sales reps or if I'm talking to real estate agents and I'm pulling information out of them, success for me is a required data point that has no blanks. I want to see people in there. I want to see them using it, updating it. I want to see them chatting me about the issues that they have, because at least then I know that they're in it and they're using it and they're trying. Silence for me is the worst thing that can happen. So discussion, data quality, those are also certainly things that I would look for in a successful deployment. And the last one, funny enough, but definitely true, is feedback. A successful deployment will have feedback and it'll have additional requests. If you launch a dashboard and people go, cool, love it, but like that's it, that's not going to last long. I want you to say, oh my gosh, this is great, but I need 3 more things in there, and then this will be a one-stop shop for me. I want to get to that point where you're asking for more, asking for changes, asking for feedback, because then I know you're not just accessing it, you're thinking critically about what it's doing, what answers it's showing you, and you're asking for changes or modifications to make it perfect. That to me is successful. It should be sticky. It should be a high quality data product, whether that's an input or an output, and you should be getting a lot of feedback and a lot of communication about it. When I see a combination of those three things, I'll feel good standing in my own two shoes saying, all right, that was a good idea, that was a good deployment, that was well baked, well received, and try to sort of earmark what happened in that project for later.
So when there's chatter, we know people actually care, and we know it's actually solving a real problem, it sounds like. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love chatter. I love chatter. I want, send me all the emails, send me all of the ideas. I'm not sure that I'll be able to fix all of them. This came up at SecureLink recently. We launched a dashboard and I got, honestly, probably one of my favorite emails. CGO emails me back with probably close to 20 different requests, down to moving lines. Like I'm a big designer, Tom. I love design. I will pixel push a Tableau dashboard until it's like ASMR for data visualization. And he's like, can we do this? And my response was just blue notes appended to the end. Done, 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 done. I'll check on this one. Done, 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 done.
Nice.
Yeah, the feedback is great. I mean, that makes me smile. That's good. That's a rollout well rolled.
Nice. Okay. It sounds like a good closing question then. Let's end on a high, like one of the best rollouts or one of the best parts of a rollout ever. What was it? Why does it come to mind? What do people have to learn from this?
Yeah, that's an easy one. And I think it's something that it's probably one of my favorite projects of all time. 2019, we working for their growth operations and wanted to come up with a more data-driven way to set real estate expansion goals. So previously at that company, we'd said, all right, so like what cool cities can we go to for our brand messaging? But we'd reached a size where, it was more important to consider the financial components and honestly the property constraints, the constraints of that city to absorb the amount of real estate we were asking for. So we set up a huge project to figure out ways to allocate our annual expansion goals across the globe. It was really great, awesome team. And one of the things that it did, which was became one of my favorite things to talk about, it convinced a non-data driven group of people that a data-driven approach was feasible and that their local or industry-specific business knowledge wouldn't be negated by a digital deployment. Specifically talking about real estate, real estate sourcing, real estate deal leads. Some of the least tech-driven guys that I know, the handshake guys, just like sales, the handshake guys. And to get them on board with a machine learning algorithm for, real estate deployments across the globe in submarkets was tough. That's a tough sell. I'm going to tell you about your submarkets more than you were going to tell me about that. Oh, I don't know. But that's when you string in their opinions and you can modify, an output based on context. You can change the rules. It's not set in stone. So this deployment was one of the first times. It was successful. We did launch a great set of expansion goals that year, but it was the first time where I had seen my previously most resistant stakeholders crack a smile and say, "Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that." And I think that's something that we should do more often. We should strive to get the non-adopters at least taking their first step, at least getting a little bit of adoption. Because let's face it, that's where we're headed. We're headed towards digital all the time.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And for sales as well, we're heading towards data and more so.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's super important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have you ever had that
Always.
where like you know, there might be a sales rep, sales leader, and you've done a successful job at like really convincing them of the power of data. It's a story that it's becoming increasingly data driven, but some people are still pretty arty out there. I don't know if you agree with that, but it'd be cool to hear how you convert people to looking at the data. It's an important one as we go into 2021 and 2022, I think.
Yeah. Um, I've usually found that for sales reps, the first step in that process is making their life a little bit easier.
Mm.
Find a way to automate the updates on these deals that they're responsible for, and it'll pay dividends. Make something easier. It's almost like a give and take. Like, I'll take something off of your plate, and in return, I'm going to give you a new tool that I need you to use. That's always a good strategy for it. And I would say I'm going to go back to the utility component. Sales reps need utility. They need utility, and they need it fast. They need it fast, light, and effective. Those would be, if you were to ask me 3 attributes of a deployed dashboard or feature or tool for a sales rep: fast, easy, and effective. And I think, when you take the time to figure out what they need and make their life a little bit easier, then turning the dime and saying, okay, this was the output of that effort that you just made. Look at how awesome it is, or look how much it serves your manager, your VP of sales, and sort of go with that route.